glittering harbor of Monaco, where yachts gleam and secrets simmer, a lavish gala aboard La Sirène turns deadly. Lord Reginald Ashbourne lies murdered, a jeweled Venetian dagger in his heart. Hercule Poirot, the master detective, steps into a web of lies. Lipstick on a shattered glass, a torn silk scrap, a cloaked figure in the shadows. Was it the betrayed wife, the ruined captain, the swindled heiress, or the enigmatic doctor? As motives unravel and clues collide, Poirot's little gray cells race to unmask a killer before the tide washes the truth away. The murder in Monaco harbor. Who will survive the night? Chapter 1. The glitter of Monaco. The Mediterranean sun cast a golden sheen over the harbor of Monaco, where yachts bobbed like gleaming jewels against the azure water. Hercule Poirot, immaculate in a cream linen suit and straw hat, strolled along the Quai des États-Unis, his patent leather shoes clicking softly on the pavement. He had arrived in Monte Carlo at the insistence of his old friend, Madame Giselle Fournier, a retired opera diva whose penchant for extravagance rivaled her once celebrated soprano. Her yacht, La Sirène, moored prominently in the harbor, was to host a gala that evening, and Poirot, craving a respite from London's drizzle, had acquiesced to her invitation. He paused at a café, its tables spilling onto the quay, and ordered a tisane, his preferred drink in such balmy climes. From his vantage point, he observed the harbor's bustle, fishermen hauling their nets, tourists snapping photographs, and the elite gliding toward La Sirène for the night's festivities. Poirot's keen eyes, beneath the brim of his hat, catalogued the arriving guests with the precision of a watchmaker. First came Lord Reginald Ashbourne, a British financier whose angular frame and hawkish features betrayed a man accustomed to command. His wealth, amassed through ruthless speculation, was the talk of London's clubs, though whispers of shady dealings clung to him like cigar smoke. At his side was Lady Evelyn Ashbourne, a delicate beauty of no more than 25, her emerald gown catching the sunlight. Yet her eyes darted nervously, and her fingers twisted the pearls at her throat, a detail Poirot noted with interest. Next appeared Captain Marcel Dubois, a former French naval officer turned yacht broker, his tanned face set in a scowl. His navy blazer bore the faint outline of a missing insignia, a reminder, perhaps, of a career cut short. Miss Clara Beaumont, an American heiress, followed, her platinum hair swept into a chignon, her scarlet lips curled in a half-smile that suggested both charm and calculation. Her fortune, inherited from a steel magnate father, was rumored to be dwindling, yet her confidence seemed unshaken. Last to board was Dr. Heinrich Voss, a German psychiatrist with a scholarly air. His gray suit was understated, his movements deliberate, and his small leather notebook, clutched like a talisman, piqued Poirot's curiosity. What, he wondered, did a man of the mind record at a gala? As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of coral and violet, Poirot sipped his tisane, savoring the order of the scene. The harbor was a symphony of wealth and elegance, yet beneath its surface he sensed discord. The human heart, he mused, it is never so simple as the sparkle of this place. At precisely 9 o'clock, a scream shattered the evening's calm, high and piercing, like a note held too long. It came from La Sirène. Poirot set down his cup, his mustache twitching with sudden alertness. He rose, moving with surprising agility for a man of his fastidious demeanor, and hastened toward the yacht. A crowd had gathered at the gangplank, their murmurs rising like a tide. Poirot, with a polite but firm "Pardon, monsieur," slipped through to the deck. There, illuminated by the yacht's lanterns, lay Lord Reginald Ashbourne, sprawled on the polished teak. His eyes stared blankly at the stars, and from his chest protruded a jeweled dagger, its emerald-encrusted hilt glinting cruelly. A glass of champagne lay spilled beside him, its contents pooling like liquid gold. The guests stood frozen. Lady Evelyn, clutching a handkerchief, her face ashen. Captain Dubois, rigid as a sentinel. Miss Beaumont, lighting a cigarette with trembling hands. Dr. Voss, his notebook now closed, his expression unreadable. Madame Fournier, descending from the upper deck, gasped and clutched Poirot's arm. "Mon Dieu, Hercule," she whispered. "What horror is this?" Poirot's eyes swept the scene, noting the dagger's ornate design, the angle of the body, the faint scent of cigar smoke lingering in the air. He turned to the approaching figure of Inspector Leclerc, a stocky Monegasque policeman with a bristling mustache and a skeptical gaze. "Monsieur Poirot," Leclerc said, "this is a matter for the police." "Naturellement," Poirot replied, his voice smooth as velvet. "But permit me to observe, the dagger, it is not ordinary. The crime, it is not random. Hercule Poirot, he will assist if you allow." Leclerc hesitated, then nodded grudgingly, aware of Poirot's reputation. The detective knelt beside the body, his gloved fingers hovering over the dagger without touching it. "A weapon of history," he murmured, "and of intention." As the police began to cordon off the deck, Poirot's gray cells hummed. The gala, so carefully orchestrated, had become a stage for murder. And in this glittering harbor, where secrets bobbed as freely as the yachts, he knew the truth lay hidden in the shadows of human motive. "Mes amis," he said softly, addressing no one in particular. "The holiday, it is over. Now, the work of Hercule Poirot begins." Chapter 2. The Scene of the Crime. The deck of La Sirène gleamed under the soft glow of lanterns, but the air was heavy with the tang of tragedy. Hercule Poirot stood motionless, his sharp eyes absorbing the grim tableau before him. Lord Reginald Ashbourne, financier and titan of industry, lay sprawled on the polished teak, his lifeless gaze fixed on the starlit sky. The jeweled dagger, its emerald-encrusted hilt catching the light like a malevolent eye, protruded from his chest with surgical precision. A shattered champagne flute lay beside him, its contents seeping into the wood, mingling with a faint trace of blood. The scene was as theatrical as it was chilling, and Poirot, ever the connoisseur of human drama, felt his little gray cells quiver with anticipation. Inspector Leclerc, the Monegasque policeman with a bristling mustache and a penchant for procedure, had arrived promptly, his officers swarming the yacht like disciplined ants. The guests, Lady Evelyn Ashbourne, Captain Marcel Dubois, Miss Clara Beaumont, Dr. Heinrich Voss, and Madame Giselle Fournier, stood in a tense semicircle, their faces a gallery of shock, fear, and, Poirot noted, calculation. Leclerc, recognizing Poirot's reputation from a previous case in Nice, grudgingly allowed him to remain, though his eyes betrayed a flicker of resentment. "Monsieur Poirot," he said, his voice clipped, "you may observe, but do not interfere. This is a matter for the police." "Mais naturellement, Inspector," Poirot replied, his tone as smooth as the silk of his pocket square. "Hercule Poirot does not interfere. He illuminates. And this crime, it demands illumination. Non?" Without awaiting a reply, Poirot knelt beside the body, his gloved hands hovering over the scene like a conductor poised before an orchestra. The dagger fascinated him, not merely for its opulence, but for its precision. The blade had struck directly through the heart, suggesting a hand both steady and practiced. "A single thrust," he murmured, "delivered with intent. This is no crime of passion, but of design." He turned his attention to the spilled champagne. The glass, now in fragments, bore a faint smudge of lipstick on one shard, a delicate rose shade, not the bold crimson he had observed on Lady Evelyn earlier. Nearby, a half-smoked cigar rested on the deck, its tip uncharred, as if placed rather than dropped. Poirot's mustache twitched. "Curieux," he said softly. "A cigar that has not been smoked, a glass that speaks of another's lips. The stage, it is set with care." Rising, he paced the deck, his eyes darting to the starboard railing. There, caught on a splinter of wood, was a scrap of green silk, its sheen matching Lady Evelyn's gown. He plucked it free with a handkerchief, holding it to the light. "A clue, perhaps," he said to Leclerc, who hovered nearby. "Or a distraction. We shall see." Leclerc, scribbling in a notebook, grunted. "The guests are detained in the salon, Monsieur Poirot. We will question them shortly. The coroner estimates death at approximately 8:45 p.m., based on the body's condition. No one left the yacht after the scream, so the killer is among us." "Précisément," Poirot agreed, his gaze sweeping the deck once more. A faint breeze carried the scent of salt and jasmine, but also something else, a trace of cologne, sharp and medicinal, lingering near the body. He filed this detail away, his mind a ledger of minutiae. "Inspector, permit me to join your interviews. The human tongue, it reveals more than it intends. And Hercule Poirot, he listens well." Leclerc hesitated, then nodded, his expression a mix of reluctance and curiosity. They descended to the yacht's salon, a lavish chamber of mahogany and crystal, where the guests sat in uneasy silence. Madame Fournier, the hostess, stood by a porthole, her silver hair gleaming under the chandelier. Lady Evelyn, her face pale, clutched a glass of water, her fingers trembling. Captain Dubois leaned against a wall, his arms crossed, his jaw set like a man bracing for battle. Miss Beaumont, seated on a velvet sofa, lit another cigarette, her eyes darting to the door. Dr. Voss, ever the enigma, sat apart, his leather notebook open, his pen scratching softly. Poirot took a central position, his small stature belied by the authority of his presence. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, his voice clear and deliberate, "a tragedy has occurred, and we must uncover its truth. Lord Ashbourne was struck down with a dagger of rare design, a weapon not of impulse, but of purpose. I ask only for your cooperation, for the truth, it hides in the smallest details." Leclerc began the questioning, his tone brusque. "Lady Ashbourne," he said, "where were you at 8:45 p.m.? Lady Evelyn's voice quavered. "I was in the powder room, Inspector. I needed to freshen my makeup. The gala was so crowded I felt faint." Poirot tilted his head. "Madame, your lipstick, it is a striking crimson, is it not?" She nodded, her eyes wide. "Yes, I always wear it. Why do you ask?" Poirot smiled enigmatically. "A detail, nothing more." He turned to Captain Dubois. "Monsieur, you are a man of the sea. Were you on deck, perhaps, near the starboard railing?" Dubois's eyes narrowed. "I was on the lower deck, discussing a yacht sail with a client. I heard the scream and came up immediately." "And you, Mademoiselle Beaumont?" Poirot's gaze was piercing. Clara Beaumont exhaled a plume of smoke, her voice cool. I was at the bar, getting a martini. I just had words with Reggie, Lord Ashbourne, about a business matter. He was alive when I left him. Poirot's eyebrows rose. Words, mademoiselle? Of what nature? Private, she snapped, then softened. An investment gone sour. He wasn't exactly apologetic. Dr. Voss spoke next, unprompted, his German accent precise. I was on the upper deck, observing the constellations. The sky here is remarkably clear. I heard the scream and descended at once. Poirot's eyes lingered on the notebook. Herr Doctor, you write even now. Observations of the stars, perhaps? Voss's lips tightened. Of human behavior, Monsieur Poirot. It is my profession. Madame Fournier, last to speak, clasped her hands. I was with the orchestra, ensuring the music was perfect. I saw nothing until the scream brought me to the deck. Poirot nodded, his mind cataloguing their words, their gestures, their hesitations. Lady Evelyn's trembling hands, Dubois' defensive posture, Beaumont's guarded tone, Voss's inscrutable calm, Fournier's poised grief. Each was a thread in the tapestry of the crime. As Leclerc dismissed the guests to their cabins under guard, Poirot lingered in the salon, his fingers brushing the arm of a chair. The rose lipstick, the unburned cigar, the green silk, the medicinal cologne. These were not accidents but brushstrokes in a deliberate painting. The killer, he murmured, has left a signature, but it is written in code. Hercule Poirot, he will decipher it. He stepped onto the deck where the night air was cool and the harbor lights danced on the water. The dagger's origins nagged at him, a relic of history, not chance. And the cologne, so distinct, suggested a presence not yet fully revealed. As he gazed at La Sirene's silhouette, Poirot felt the weight of the mystery settle upon him, a challenge as intricate as the mosaics of Monte Carlo's cathedral. "Inspector Leclerc," he said, turning to the policeman who was barking orders to his men. "We must learn of this dagger. Its story, it will lead us to the heart of the crime. And tomorrow we shall see what secrets the light of day reveals." Leclerc nodded, his skepticism softening. Poirot, satisfied, adjusted his hat and descended the gangplank, his mind already weaving the threads of evidence into a pattern only he could see. The glitter of Monaco had dimmed, but the brilliance of his little gray cells burned bright. Chapter 3. The Alibis. The morning sun bathed Monaco's harbor in a soft golden glow, but the atmosphere aboard La Sirène remained taut with suspicion. Hercule Poirot, impeccably dressed in a dove-gray suit, stood in the yacht's salon, his hands clasped behind his back, his mustache perfectly symmetrical. The guests, summoned once more by Inspector Leclerc, sat in a semicircle of gilt chairs, their faces etched with unease. The air was thick with the scent of coffee and tension, as if the very walls of the opulent chamber held their breath. Poirot's eyes, sharp as a falcon's, scanned each suspect, noting the flicker of a glance, the tightening of a jaw, the restless tap of a foot. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, his voice a velvet blade. "Last night, Lord Ashbourne met his end, struck by a dagger of rare provenance. Each of you claims innocence, yet the truth, it hides in the shadows of your words. Hercule Poirot, he will bring it to the light. Let us revisit your movements, with precision, s'il vous plaît." Inspector Leclerc, standing by a porthole with his notebook in hand, cleared his throat. "We've established the time of death at approximately 8:45 p.m. The scream was heard at 9:10 p.m. Let's hear your alibis again, and this time, no omissions." His tone was gruff, but Poirot's presence softened the interrogation's edge, his calm authority commanding attention. Lady Evelyn Ashbourne spoke first, her voice barely above a whisper. Her pale hands twisted a lace handkerchief, and her eyes, red-rimmed, avoided Poirot's gaze. "I told you, I was in the powder room. The crowd, the heat, it was overwhelming. I stepped away to compose myself, perhaps at 8:40. I heard the scream as I returned." Poirot tilted his head, his expression deceptively mild. "Madame, you are precise about the time, yet your hands, they tremble. The powder room, it is near the starboard deck, no? Did you see anyone as you emerged?" Lady Evelyn flushed, her fingers tightening on the handkerchief. "No one, Monsieur Poirot. It was quiet." He nodded, his eyes lingering on her for a moment before turning to Captain Marcel Dubois. The former naval officer sat rigidly, his tanned face a mask of restraint, though a muscle twitched in his jaw. "Captain," Poirot said, "you claim you were on the lower deck discussing a yacht sale. This client, he has a name?" Dubois hesitated, his eyes narrowing. "Monsieur Laurent, a businessman from Marseille. We spoke near the engine room, far from the deck. I heard the scream and rushed up." Poirot's mustache quivered slightly. "The engine room, it is noisy, oui? Yet you heard the scream so clearly. And this Monsieur Laurent, he will confirm your story?" Dubois's jaw tightened further. "He left before the police arrived. I can provide his contact." "Bien," Poirot said, making a mental note. He turned to Miss Clara Beaumont, who lounged in her chair, a cigarette dangling from her manicured fingers. Her rose-painted lips curled into a faint, defiant smile, but her eyes were wary. "Mademoiselle," Poirot said, "you were at the bar after your disagreement with Lord Ashbourne. This argument, it was heated, was it not?" Clara exhaled a plume of smoke, her voice cool but edged with irritation. "Reggie cheated me out of a fortune in a property deal. I called him out on it, yes, but I left him alive, sipping his champagne, and went to the bar for a martini. The bartender can vouch for me." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "And this martini, mademoiselle, it was served promptly? You did not, perhaps, linger near the starboard railing?" Her smile faltered, but she recovered quickly. "I was at the bar, Monsieur Poirot. Ask anyone." Dr. Heinrich Voss, seated apart, closed his leather notebook with a soft snap as Poirot's gaze settled on him. His gray eyes were calm, almost too calm, like a lake hiding depths unseen. "Herr Doctor," Poirot said, "you were stargazing, alone, on the upper deck. A solitary pursuit. Non? Did you see or hear anything before the scream?" Voss adjusted his spectacles, his voice measured. "The stars were my focus, Monsieur Poirot. I heard faint voices from below, perhaps Lord Ashbourne's, perhaps not. The scream drew me to the deck where I found the tragedy." Poirot's fingers tapped lightly against his cane. "Voices, you say, yet you did not investigate. A psychiatrist, he is attuned to distress, is he not?" Voss's lips thinned. "I am not a man of action, monsieur, I observe." Finally, Poirot turned to Madame Giselle Fournier, who stood by the grand piano, her silver gown shimmering like moonlight. Her composure was regal, but her eyes betrayed a flicker of anxiety. "Madame," Poirot said gently, "as hostess, you were everywhere, non? Yet at 8:45, where were you precisely?" "I was near the orchestra, ensuring the musicians played Ravel as I requested," she replied, her voice steady. I moved among the guests, but I was far from the starboard deck. The scream, it was like a knife itself cutting through the music. Poirot nodded, his mind cataloguing their words. Each alibi was plausible, yet each held a crack through which doubt could seep. He stepped to a side table, where the police had placed the jeweled dagger, now cleaned of blood, but no less menacing. Its emerald hilt gleamed, whispering of ancient grudges. "This dagger," he said, addressing the room, "it is not a weapon of chance. It belongs to a story, a history. Who among you knows of such things?" Silence fell, heavy as velvet. Lady Evelyn's handkerchief tore slightly in her grip. Dubois' hands clenched. Clara stubbed out her cigarette with unnecessary force. Voss's pen, poised over his notebook, paused. Madame Fournier's gaze flickered to the dagger, then away. Poirot's eyes narrowed. "The truth, it is like the sea outside. It cannot be held back forever. Inspector Leclerc, may we examine the deck once more? There are details, I think, that await discovery." Leclerc, who had been watching Poirot with growing fascination, agreed. The guests were dismissed to their cabins, still under guard, and Poirot led the way to the starboard deck. The morning light revealed what the lanterns had obscured, a faint scuff mark on the railing, as if someone had leaned heavily against it, and a single pearl bead nestled in a crevice of the deck. Poirot knelt, retrieving the bead with his handkerchief. "From a necklace, perhaps," he mused, "or an earring. It is not alone in its story." Leclerc frowned. "A bead, Monsieur Poirot? It could belong to anyone." "Non, Inspector," Poirot said, his voice soft but firm. "It belongs to the truth. And the truth, it is particular." As they descended to the quay, Poirot's mind whirled. The rose lipstick on the champagne glass, distinct from Lady Evelyn's crimson, pointed elsewhere. Perhaps to Clara Beaumont. The unburned cigar suggested a staged scene, possibly implicating Dubois. The green silk matching Evelyn's gown was too convenient, and Voss's calm, his notebook, his solitary stargazing, too perfect, too detached. The pearl bead was new, a whisper of carelessness in a meticulous crime. "Inspector," Poirot said, pausing by the harbor's edge, "we must trace this dagger's origins. And this Monsieur Laurent, the client of Captain Dubois, he must be found. The alibis, they are like a puzzle, but the pieces, they do not yet fit." Leclerc nodded, his skepticism yielding to respect. Poirot gazed at the harbor, where yachts swayed gently, their secrets bobbing beneath the surface. "The human heart," he murmured. "It is a labyrinth, but Hercule Poirot, he has the map." Chapter 4. The Dagger's Tale. The midday sun hung over Monaco, casting sharp shadows across the harbor where La Sirène lay moored, its elegance now tainted by the specter of murder. Hercule Poirot, his straw hat tilted against the glare, navigated the bustling streets of Monte Carlo toward the shop of Monsieur Rossi, an antiquarian renowned for his knowledge of Mediterranean artifacts. The jeweled dagger, with its emerald-encrusted hilt and ancient crest, weighed heavily on Poirot's mind. It was no mere weapon. It was a relic, a key to the killer's intent, and he was determined to unlock its secrets. The shop, tucked between a perfumery and a jeweler on the Avenue de la Costa, was a dim cave of treasures. Shelves groaned under the weight of Byzantine icons, Renaissance bronzes, and faded manuscripts. Monsieur Rossi, a wiry man with spectacles perched on a hawk-like nose, greeted Poirot with a nod, his eyes gleaming with curiosity. Monsieur Poirot, the famous detective, To what do I owe this honor?" Poirot, ever precise, produced a police sketch of the dagger, courtesy of Inspector Leclerc. "This blade, Monsieur Rossi, was found in the heart of Lord Reginald Ashbourne last night. It is, I believe, of historical significance. What can you tell me?" Rossi adjusted his spectacles, studying the sketch with reverence. "Mon Dieu," he murmured, "this is a Conti dagger, forged in Venice in the 17th century for the Conti family, a clan known for their wealth and their vendettas. The emerald hilt, the crest of a serpent entwined with a rose. It is unmistakable. Such daggers were not sold. They were inherited or, in rare cases, stolen." He paused, his fingers tracing the sketch. "This one, I wager, comes from the Conti villa in Venice, a place of many secrets." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "Lord Ashbourne recently acquired a villa in Venice, no? Could this dagger have come from there?" Rossi nodded slowly. "It is possible. The Conti estate was auctioned last year after the last heir died without issue. Lord Ashbourne, with his appetite for trophies, may have purchased it and its contents. But to carry such a dagger to a gala?" He shook his head. "It suggests a purpose, Monsieur Poirot. Revenge, perhaps, or a message." "Précisément," Poirot said, his mind racing. "Merci, Monsieur Rossi. You have illuminated much." Leaving the shop, Poirot walked toward the harbor, his thoughts a whirl of connections. The Conti dagger pointed to a motive rooted in history, possibly tied to one of the guests. Dr. Heinrich Voss, with his German precision and enigmatic notebook, seemed a likely candidate for such a vendetta. But Clara Beaumont's sharp ambition and Madame Fournier's cultured past could not be dismissed. The dagger's presence on La Sirène was no accident. It was a declaration. Back at the harbor, Poirot met Inspector Leclerc at a café overlooking the quay. The inspector, nursing a black coffee, looked weary but alert. "Monsieur Poirot, my men have located Monsieur Laurent, the yacht buyer Captain Dubois mentioned. He confirms they spoke on the lower deck until 8:50 p.m., but he saw nothing unusual. We're still verifying his story." "Bon," Poirot said, sipping a tisane. "And the pearl bead from the deck? Any progress?" Leclerc shrugged. "It could belong to any woman on the yacht. Lady Evelyn wore pearls, as did Madame Fournier. We're testing it for traces of anything useful." Poirot nodded, his gaze drifting to the dock workers unloading crates nearby. One, a grizzled man with a limp, caught his eye. The man's glance was furtive, his hands pausing as he noticed Poirot's scrutiny. "Inspector," Poirot said softly. "That man. Ask him if he saw anything unusual before the murder." Leclerc signaled an officer who approached the dock worker. After a brief exchange, the man, reluctant but prodded by authority, shuffled over. "Name's Pierre," he said gruffly. "I work the docks at night. Saw a figure in a dark cloak near La Sirène around 8:30 p.m. Carried a small case like a doctor's bag. Climbed the service ladder to the yacht, quiet as a shadow." Poirot's mustache twitched. "A cloak, you say? In this case, describe it, s'il vous plaît." "Black leather, small, with a clasp. Looked heavy," Pierre said, scratching his beard. "Didn't see the face. They moved fast, like they didn't want to be seen." "Merci, Pierre," Poirot said, dismissing him with a nod. To Leclerc, he added, "This cloaked figure, it is significant. A doctor's bag, perhaps, suggests our Dr. Voss, no? Yet we must not leap to conclusions." Returning to La Sirène, Poirot requested to see the deck again. The police had cordoned it off, but the morning light revealed new details. Near the railing, where the green silk had been found, Poirot noticed a faint smear of oil. Not engine oil, but something finer, like that used for a blade. "The dagger," he murmured. "It was oiled before the strike, to ensure a clean thrust. A professional touch, perhaps." He examined the area around the spilled champagne glass, now removed for evidence. The deck bore a faint scratch, as if something metallic had been dragged, a belt buckle, perhaps, or a watch. Poirot's eyes gleamed. The killer, they were not careless, but even the meticulous leave traces. In the salon, Poirot requested a private word with Madame Fournier. The diva, her silver hair swept into an elegant chignon, met him with a guarded smile. "Hercule, this tragedy, it ruins my gala, my reputation. What do you need?" "Madame," Poirot said, his tone gentle but firm. "You know the Conti family, perhaps, from your days in Venice, during your opera tours?" Her eyes flickered, but she shook her head. "I performed in Venice, yes, but the Contis were before my time. I know only their legend, wealth, power, and blood feuds." Poirot nodded, unconvinced. "And last night, you saw no one near the starboard deck before the scream? No cloaked figure? No case?" Her hand tightened on her fan. "No, Hercule. I was with the orchestra, as I said." As he left her, Poirot's mind churned. The cloaked figure, the oiled dagger, the scratched deck, these were not random. The Conti connection pointed to a vendetta, but whose? Voss, with his scholarly detachment, seemed too obvious. Clara Beaumont, with her financial grudge, might have access to such a weapon through her high society connections. And Madame Fournier's denial carried a tremor of unease. He rejoined Leclerc on the quay, where the inspector was reviewing a report. "Monsieur Poirot, the pearl bead has no fingerprints, but it matches a necklace Lady Evelyn wore last night. She claims she lost it during the gala before the murder." "Interesting," Poirot said, his fingers tapping his cane. "The bead, the silk, they point to Lady Evelyn, yet too neatly, non? We must find this cloaked figure, Inspector. And the Conti villa in Venice, its records must be searched. The dagger's tale, it is not yet finished." As they parted, Poirot gazed at the harbor, where the sea sparkled with deceptive calm. The mystery was a mosaic, each piece, oil, scratch, bead, cloak, fitting into a pattern only his gray cells could discern. "The killer," he murmured. "They think they have outwitted Hercule Poirot. But the truth, it is like the tide. It always returns." Chapter 5. Motives and Masks. The late afternoon light filtered through the salon windows of La Sirène, casting long shadows across the mahogany paneling and crystal chandeliers. Hercule Poirot stood at the center of the room, his compact figure radiating quiet authority, his eyes glinting like polished obsidian as he surveyed the assembled guests. The air was thick with unspoken accusations, the scent of polished wood mingling with the faint musk of nervous perspiration. Lady Evelyn Ashbourne, Captain Marcel Dubois, Miss Clara Beaumont, Dr. Heinrich Voss, and Madame Giselle Fournier sat in a tense tableau, their postures betraying the weight of scrutiny. Inspector Leclerc, stationed by the door, flipped through his notebook, his impatience tempered by Poirot's commanding presence. "Mesdames et messieurs," Poirot began, his voice a measured cadence. "The murder of Lord Reginald Ashbourne is a tapestry woven with threads of motive. Each of you had reason to wish him harm, and Hercule Poirot, he will unravel these threads. Let us speak plainly. Why did you despise this man?" The silence that followed was brittle, broken only by the distant lapping of waves against the yacht's hull. Poirot's gaze settled on Lady Evelyn, whose delicate frame seemed to shrink under his scrutiny. Her fingers, bare of the pearl necklace now under police examination, clutched the arm of her chair. "Madame," Poirot said gently, "your husband, he was not a faithful man, was he?" Lady Evelyn's lips trembled, her voice barely audible. "Reginald was cruel. He flaunted his affairs, humiliated me in public. Last month, he threatened to rewrite his will, leaving me nothing. I hated him for it." Her eyes filled with tears, but Poirot noted a flicker of defiance beneath her grief. He turned to Captain Dubois, whose broad shoulders were hunched, his naval discipline fraying at the edges. "Captain," Poirot said, "Lord Ashbourne's influence reached beyond the boardroom, no? He played a role in your disgrace, I think." Dubois's hands clenched, his knuckles whitening. "He exposed a smuggling operation I was falsely accused of during my naval service," he said, his voice low and bitter. "It cost me my career, my honor. Ashbourne profited from my ruin, buying my family's shipping business for a pittance." His eyes burned with suppressed rage, but he added, "I didn't kill him. I wanted justice, not murder." Poirot's mustache quivered as he shifted his attention to Miss Clara Beaumont. She sat with her legs crossed, her cigarette holder poised like a weapon, her rose-painted lips set in a defiant line. "Mademoiselle," Poirot said, "your argument with Lord Ashbourne was no mere business dispute, I wager. What did he take from you?" Clara's eyes narrowed, but she spoke with calculated calm. "He swindled me out of $3 million in a real estate venture, my family's last fortune. I'm ruined thanks to him. He laughed when I confronted him, called me a naive child." She paused, exhaling smoke. "I wanted him to pay, but not with a dagger." Poirot nodded, his gaze sliding to Dr. Heinrich Voss, who sat apart, his leather notebook closed, his gray eyes unreadable behind his spectacles. "Herr Doctor," Poirot said, "you treated Lord Ashbourne, did you not? What secrets did he share in your sessions?" Voss's fingers tightened on his notebook, his voice cool. "Patient confidentiality binds me, Monsieur Poirot, but I will say Ashbourne was paranoid, obsessed with enemies in the business world. He spoke of threats, but never named them." His pause was deliberate. "I had no reason to harm him. My work is to heal, not destroy." Poirot's eyes lingered on Voss, sensing a wall of restraint. Finally, he turned to Madame Fournier, who stood by the piano, her silver gown catching the light like a beacon. "Madame," he said, "you are the gracious hostess, yet even you had a shadow with Lord Ashbourne, no?" Madame Fournier's fan snapped shut, her composure faltering for a fraction of a second. "Hercule," she said softly, "in Paris, years ago, Reginald discovered a mistake from my youth. A scandal involving a married conductor. He held it over me, threatening to expose it unless I introduced him to certain investors. I complied, but I resented him deeply." Poirot clasped his hands, his mind a whirl of motives: infidelity, ruin, betrayal, blackmail. "Each of you," he said, "had a fire in your heart against Lord Ashbourne, but the dagger, it speaks of a deeper wound, a vendetta tied to the Conti family. Who among you knows their history?" The question hung like a guillotine. Lady Evelyn's breath hitched, Dubois's jaw tightened, Clara's cigarette paused midair, Voss's pen twitched, and Madame Fournier's fan trembled. No one spoke, but the silence was eloquent, a chorus of hidden truths. Poirot stepped toward the table where the dagger lay under a glass case, its emerald hilt gleaming like a serpent's eye. "This blade," he said, "was not chosen by chance. It is a relic of vengeance, of a family wronged. I ask again, who knows the Contis?" Dr. Voss coughed softly, a sound that seemed to echo in the quiet room. "The Contis are a legend in Venice," he said, his tone neutral. "Their feuds are history, nothing more. I know of them only through books." Poirot's eyes narrowed, catching the faint tremor in Voss's voice. "Books, Herr Doctor? Or perhaps a closer connection?" Voss met his gaze, unflinching. "Books, Monsieur Poirot?" Leclerc, growing restless, interjected. "Monsieur Poirot, we've traced the Conti villa's sale. Ashbourne bought it through an agent in Venice, along with its contents, including artifacts. The dagger may have been among them, but we've found no record of its transfer to Monaco." "Interesting," Poirot said, his fingers tapping his cane. "The dagger, it traveled with purpose, and the cloaked figure seen by the dock worker, carrying a case, climbing the ladder. This suggests a plan, not an impulse." He turned back to the guests, his voice soft but piercing. "The motives you reveal are but masks. Behind them lies the truth of the killer's heart. Hercule Poirot, he will unmask it." As Leclerc dismissed the guests to their cabins, Poirot lingered, his gaze falling on the piano, where a single sheet of music, Ravel's Jeu d'eau, lay slightly askew. He lifted it, revealing a faint smudge of ink, as if someone had written in haste. "Another trace," he murmured, "of a hand that moves in shadow." Outside, the harbor sparkled under the fading sun. But Poirot's thoughts were far from its beauty. The motives were clear, but the Conti dagger pointed to a deeper grudge, one that Voss's calm denial only sharpened. Clara's financial ruin, Dubois' lost honor, Evelyn's betrayal, Fournier's blackmail. Each was a spark, but which had ignited the crime? And the cloaked figure with its doctor's bag loomed like a phantom in his mind. "Inspector," Poirot said, joining Leclerc on the deck, "we must learn more of Dr. Voss's past, and this ink smudge, it may be nothing, or it may be a signature. Send it for analysis, s'il vous plaît." Leclerc nodded, his earlier skepticism now a grudging respect. Poirot gazed at the horizon, where the sea met the sky in a line of perfect order. "The human soul," he said softly, "it wears many masks, but the truth, it is naked, and Hercule Poirot, he will find it." Chapter 6. The Cloaked Figure. The twilight over Monaco harbor draped La Sirène in a veil of indigo, the yacht's lanterns casting flickering pools of light across the deck. Hercule Poirot stood by the starboard railing, where Lord Ashbourne had met his end, his gloved hands resting on his cane, his eyes scanning the scene with the precision of a jeweler inspecting a flawed gem. The air was cool, carrying the briny scent of the sea and a faint echo of the gala's lost gaiety. Inspector Leclerc, his notebook now dog-eared from constant use, joined Poirot, his face etched with the strain of a case that grew more labyrinthine by the hour. "Monsieur Poirot," Leclerc said, his voice tinged with frustration, "we've analyzed the ink smudge from the piano. It's from a fountain pen, common enough, but the residue suggests a rare blue-black ink imported from Germany. We're cross-checking it with the guest's possessions." Poirot's mustache twitched, his mind latching onto the detail. "Germany, Inspector? This is most suggestive, no? Dr. Voss, he is German, and a man of meticulous habits. Perhaps his notebook holds more than observations of the stars." Leclerc nodded, then added, "We've also confirmed Monsieur Laurent's alibi for Captain Dubois. He was indeed on the lower deck until 8:50 p.m., as Dubois claimed. But the cloaked figure Pierre saw, it's our best lead. We're questioning more dock workers to narrow the description." "Bon," Poirot said, his gaze returning to the railing. The scuff mark and pearl bead found here whispered of a struggle, or perhaps a deliberate misdirection. The cloaked figure, with its black leather case, loomed in his thoughts, a shadow moving with purpose. "Inspector, let us pursue this phantom. A case like a doctor's bag. It points to Dr. Voss, but we must be certain." Poirot requested a private audience with Voss, and they met in a small cabin, its porthole framing the darkening harbor. Voss sat stiffly, his spectacles glinting, his leather notebook closed on the table before him. "Herr Doctor," Poirot began, his tone deceptively mild. "You are a man of science, of precision. A black leather case, such as a doctor might carry. Do you possess such a thing?" Voss's fingers brushed the notebook, a gesture Poirot noted. "I do," he admitted, his voice steady. "It holds my tools, pens, a stethoscope, notepads. Nothing sinister, Monsieur Poirot. I used it last night to carry my work to the gala." "And this case," Poirot pressed, "it was with you on the upper deck while you studied the stars?" Voss nodded, his eyes unblinking. "Yes, I left it by my chair when I heard the scream and descended." Poirot leaned forward, his voice soft but piercing. "Yet a dock worker saw a cloaked figure with such a case climbing a service ladder to La Sirène at 8:30 p.m. Not the upper deck, Herr Doctor, but the starboard side, near where Lord Ashbourne fell. How do you explain this?" Voss's composure faltered, a faint flush rising to his cheeks. "I was not cloaked, Monsieur Poirot, nor did I climb any ladder. The dock worker is mistaken, or lying." Poirot's eyes narrowed, but he let the matter rest for now. "Merci, Herr Doctor. We shall speak again." As Voss left, Poirot's thoughts turned to Madame Fournier. He found her on the upper deck, gazing at the horizon, her silver gown shimmering like a beacon. "Madame," he said, approaching, "you were near the orchestra, yet the starboard deck is not so far. Did you see Dr. Voss, perhaps, moving toward the railing before the scream?" Her fan paused mid-motion, her eyes flickering with unease. I believe I saw him. Yes, near the railing, shortly before 9. He seemed in a hurry, but I thought nothing of it. The gala was chaotic." Poirot nodded, his mind cataloguing the contradiction. Voss claimed to be stargazing, yet Madame Fournier placed him near the crime scene. The cloaked figure, the German ink, Voss's case. The threads were tightening, but the pattern remained elusive. He returned to the starboard deck, where Leclerc awaited with new information. "Monsieur Poirot, another dock worker corroborates Pierre's story. A cloaked figure carrying a small case was seen boarding via the service ladder. The worker noted a glint of metal, a clasp, perhaps, or a watch." "Curieux," Poirot murmured, his fingers tracing the railing's scuff mark. "A watch, you say? Like the scratch on the deck, non? Metal against wood." He knelt, examining the spot again, and noticed a faint trace of wax, as if from a polished shoe. The killer, they were careful, but not invisible. Poirot's thoughts turned to Clara Beaumont. Her rose lipstick matched the smudge on the champagne glass, and her financial ruin gave her motive. Could she have conspired with Voss, using the cloaked figure as a distraction. He sought her out in the salon, where she sat alone, her cigarette holder discarded, her eyes weary. "Mademoiselle," Poirot said, "your lipstick, it is a delicate rose, none like that found on the champagne glass near Lord Ashbourne, and your quarrel with him, it was personal, was it not?" Clara's lips tightened, but she met his gaze. "I wore rose lipstick, yes, but I didn't drink from his glass. As for our quarrel, it was about money, nothing more. I'm not a killer, Monsieur Poirot." "Yet money," Poirot said. "It drives the heart to dark places. Did you see a cloaked figure that night, mademoiselle?" She hesitated, then shook her head. "No, I was at the bar, as I said." Poirot thanked her and stepped outside, where the harbor lights twinkled like a constellation of secrets. The cloaked figure was the key, a deliberate intrusion, not a guest's casual movement. Voss's case and Fournier's sighting pointed to him, but Clara's lipstick and the staged clues, cigar, silk, bead, suggested a broader conspiracy. He met Leclerc at the gangplank where the inspector held a report. "The ink matches a pen found in Voss's cabin," Leclerc said, "but it's circumstantial. No fingerprints, no direct link to the crime." Poirot nodded, his mind racing. "Inspector, we must search Voss's case and the Conti Villa records. Have they arrived?" "They're en route from Venice," Leclerc replied. "We should have them by morning." "Bon," Poirot said, his eyes gleaming. The cloaked figure, they thought to hide in shadow, but Hercule Poirot, he sees through the dark. Tomorrow we shall tighten the net. As he walked toward his hotel, the harbor's calm belied the storm in his mind. The wax on the deck, the metal glint, the German ink, all were pieces of a puzzle, but the cloaked figure was its heart. "The killer," he murmured. "They move like a phantom, but even phantoms leave footprints, and Hercule Poirot, he will find them." Chapter 7. The little gray cells prevail. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting Monaco's harbor in hues of amber and violet, as La Sirène stood sentinel amidst the gentle sway of yachts. Hercule Poirot, his dove-gray suit pristine despite the day's exertions, assembled the guests and Inspector Leclerc on the yacht's starboard deck, where Lord Reginald Ashbourne had met his fate. The lanterns cast a soft glow, illuminating the faces of Lady Evelyn Ashbourne, Captain Marcel Dubois, Miss Clara Beaumont, Dr. Heinrich Voss, and Madame Giselle Fournier. Each bore the strain of scrutiny, their eyes flickering with apprehension as Poirot, like a maestro before an orchestra, prepared to unveil the symphony of truth. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, his voice a velvet thread weaving through the evening air. "The murder of Lord Ashbourne was no act of impulse, but a performance, staged with the precision of a Venetian mask. The jeweled dagger, the cloaked figure, the scattered clues, they are the notes of a composition, and Hercule Poirot, he has deciphered its melody." He paced slowly, his cane tapping the deck, his eyes locking onto each suspect in turn. "Let us reconstruct the scene. Lord Ashbourne fell here, struck by a Conti dagger, a relic of a family known for vengeance. The clues, the rose lipstick, the unburned cigar, the green silk, the pearl bead, the oiled blade, the scratched deck, the wax trace, the German ink. They were placed to mislead, to point fingers at the innocent. But the little gray cells, they see through the illusion." Poirot turned to Lady Evelyn, whose pale hands clutched a shawl, her eyes wide with dread. "Madame, your torn silk and lost pearl beads suggested guilt, yet they were too convenient, non? The killer wished to implicate you, knowing your husband's cruelty gave you motive." He faced Captain Dubois, whose rigid posture betrayed a man braced for accusation. "Captain, the cigar, your brand, was placed unlit, a clumsy attempt to cast suspicion on you, exploiting your ruined career. But Monsieur Laurent's testimony clears you, for you were below deck." Clara Beaumont, her cigarette holder idle, met Poirot's gaze with a defiant tilt of her chin. "Mademoiselle," he said, "your rose lipstick on the champagne glass was damning, yet it was not you who drank. It was a deliberate touch to draw the eye to you, the swindled heiress." Poirot's gaze settled on Dr. Voss, whose spectacles glinted in the lantern light, his notebook clutched like a shield. "Herr Doctor, you are the key, the Conti dagger. It is no stranger to you. Your mother, she was a Conti, was she not? The last heir of the Villa Ashbourne purchased. You learned of his acquisition of the dagger among its treasures, and saw a chance to reclaim your family's honor." Voss's lips parted, a protest forming, but Poirot raised a hand. "No, Herr Doctor, do not deny it. The cloaked figure, seen by Pierre, carried a black leather case. Your case, containing the dagger, oiled for its deadly purpose. The German ink from your pen, found on the piano, betrays your presence near the crime scene. And Madame Fournier saw you by the railing, not stargazing as you claimed." Madame Fournier gasped, her fan trembling. "Hercule, I did not mean to—" Poirot waved her silent, his eyes never leaving Voss. "But you, Herr Doctor, did not act alone. The lipstick, the careful staging. It required a partner, one with access to Lord Ashbourne, one with her own grudge." He turned to Clara Beaumont, whose defiance crumbled, her face paling. "Mademoiselle Beaumont, you and Dr. Voss, you are lovers, non? Together you planned this murder. Voss for his family's vendetta, you for the millions Ashbourne stole. You lured him to the railing, sharing a drink, leaving your lipstick on his glass. Voss, cloaked, climbed the service ladder, struck the fatal blow, and planted the cigar and silk to confuse." Clara's voice broke, a sob escaping. "It wasn't supposed to be like this. Reginald ruined me, and Heinrich, he said the dagger was justice, a symbol. We thought no one would suspect." Voss stood, his calm shattered. "Enough, Clara. Monsieur Poirot, you have no proof." Poirot smiled, a serene certainty in his eyes. "The proof, Herr Doctor, is in the details. The wax on the deck matches your polished shoes. The scratch from your watch, left as you leaned to strike. The Conti Villa records, delivered this morning, confirm your mother's lineage. And your case, searched by Inspector Leclerc, held traces of blade oil, identical to that on the dagger." Leclerc stepped forward, his officers flanking Voss and Clara. "Dr. Voss, Miss Beaumont, you're under arrest," he said, his voice firm but tinged with awe at Poirot's unraveling. Clara collapsed into a chair, weeping, while Voss stood rigid, his eyes cold but defeated. The other guests exhaled, their relief palpable, though Lady Evelyn's tears and Dubois's clenched fists spoke of lingering wounds. Madame Fournier approached Poirot, her voice soft. "Hercule, you have saved my reputation, but at what cost to our hearts?" Poirot bowed slightly. "Madame, the truth, it is a bitter medicine, but it heals. The harbor, it sparkles again, free of this shadow." As Leclerc led the culprits away, Poirot lingered on the deck, gazing at the harbor's twinkling lights. The Conti dagger, now in police custody, had told its tale of vengeance. But it was the human heart, its greed, its pride, its pain, that had scripted the crime. "The little gray cells," he murmured. "They triumph, for they see what the heart conceals." He descended the gangplank, the sea air cool against his face, and headed toward his hotel. A tisane awaited, and perhaps a moment of peace before the next mystery called. Monaco's glitter had dimmed, but Poirot's brilliance shone undimmed, a beacon in the labyrinth of human deceit.